Hello, I'm here today to discuss children and Holy Communion. I'm delighted to welcome Mary Hawes, who is the National Children and Youth Advisor for the Church of England and an assistant priest at St Mary's with St Albans, Teddington. At the moment, not all churches invite children to participate in Holy Communion, and there are theological arguments for and against. But Mary, how do you feel about children being involved in Holy Communion?
Thank you very much for inviting me to talk about this. I feel passionately about children being able to baptize children, to be able to receive the bread and wine at communion. I think if we truly believe that children are part of the church family, and in our baptism services, we talk about welcoming them into the whole family of God, then they need to be able to receive the sacraments alongside us as part of that spiritual nourishment for their journey. Apart from anything else, we've been talking about this in the Church of England for over 50 years. And back in 1996, General Synod agreed that we could go forward with all dioceses being able to admit children to communion. So it's a long journey, and not everybody's made it there yet, but I'm passionate about helping children come as close to God as they possibly can.
Thank you, Mary. I understand that at your church, children do participate in Holy Communion. How did this decision come about, and what were the practical steps taken to get you there?
Thank you. Yes, it's probably about 8 years now since we made the decision, but it wasn't as straightforward a road as we'd hoped. The vicar and I were both passionate about wanting to admit children to communion, but we knew that this was about the whole church, thinking about the implications and what needed to happen. So we held some open meetings so that people could talk about their concerns, particularly with the PCC. And at that point, the PCC were very reluctant to go forward. We had a couple of church members who expressed their unease very forcibly. So rather than cause a split within the church community, the vicar and I kind of withdrew and awaited. It's probably about 2 years later that we talked to the PCC again, and then they were much more keen to go forward. So following their go-ahead, we talked with the whole church through sermons and open conversations. We talked with families about what it would mean, and letting people know that if we took the decision to admit children to communion, it didn't mean that the families had to have their children receiving communion. It was still very much a decision made by the children, their families, alongside the clergy. So having gone ahead, got permission from our bishop, we then put together a short preparation course. There are several that are published, which are very good. We wanted something slightly more bespoke, and so we put together a 3-session course, and we made sure that families came to this. So it wasn't something children would come to, but they would come with either their parent or their carer, so that together they were exploring more about Holy Communion. They were having the chance to talk about what it meant. And interestingly, several parents over the various courses we've done have said, I'm learning things I never knew. So together, the whole family are going on their spiritual journey together. So having followed the course, we then check with the families and children that they still want to go forward. We've had 1 or 2 children say, no, we don't want to receive Holy Communion. And that's fine, we respect that decision. And then we admit them during one of our main Sunday services.
Thank you. And what would you say to a church leader who is considering having children participate in Holy Communion?
I say go ahead and consider it wider with your church. This isn't a decision a clergy person can make on their own. It has to be something that's discussed with the whole church and then put forward to the bishop, and the bishop still has to give permission. But I think if we are serious about accompanying children on their spiritual journey, then we should look at every possibility. And when people have done research with children who've been receiving communion for a while and with their churches, they found that it's made a difference, not only to the children, how they feel part of the community, but also to the adults who recognise that being part of God's family isn't about knowing enough to get in. It's about the gift of grace that God gives to us.
Mary, thank you so much for talking to me today. Is there anything else you'd like to add about children and Holy Communion?
No, except to endorse your amazing website. It's one of the best that I've seen, that gives so much information. We need to remember that in the early church, the evidence seems to point to the fact that children receive the sacraments. So we've gone through a long journey theologically and historically and sociologically on this road. But I think it can only enhance our life together as the people of God and as a community in our particular location.
Thank you. If you would like to find out more about the history and theology of children and Holy Communion, or are a church leader looking to have Holy Communion in your parish, please go to www.exeter.anglican.org and search Children and Holy Communion.